Thank you for joining me in this episode of Jason Stewart Photography. As you can see, we're out in my backyard in sunny Southern California. It's just a beautiful afternoon. And the reason we're out here is because I'm in the middle of doing a photography project. The project that I'm going to be sharing with you today is called Project Birds in Flight. Capturing birds in flight is a very difficult thing to do for photographers. Even if you have the best photography equipment in the world, capturing birds while in flight and in focus is no easy task for any photographer. As a wildlife and nature photographer, I can tell you, you rarely get a second chance to capture an animal or a bird in action. And that's why it's so important to not only be familiar with your camera gear and the settings that you're supposed to have, but also that you make sure to practice using that gear with those settings on animals in action. It's the only way to be prepared, because the last thing you want to do is go out into nature and have this epic moment take place or unfold before your eyes where there's this wild animal that's doing something amazing in action, or there's this beautiful bird in this incredible setting, and then you take the picture and you look down at your LCD screen and you find out that it's either blurred or it's under or overexposed. You just can't go out into nature and get lucky with shots like that. You have to be prepared. You have to make yourself prepared, again, by not only understanding how to operate your camera, but also what settings that you need to have them on. And that's what this episode is all about, to hopefully help encourage you and give you some insight on some practical things that you can do to become a better photographer and capture birds in flight as well as animals in action, or really just anything that moves. Because if you can capture birds in flight, I am confident you can capture anything in motion for the most part. And like I said, I'm in my backyard right now, and the reason I'm in my backyard is because I have a lot of different subject matters that I could choose from. I have several different songbirds that I have taken photos of regularly. We've got sparrows, multiple species of sparrows. We have house finches. We've got hooded orioles. This past winter, I was even fortunate enough to have a very rare Audubon warbler, also known as a yellow-rumped warbler, come and visit my home for a few months. And so that was a real treat. We have hummingbirds back here. I've also been able to capture images of red-tailed hawks, crows, and even ravens. And today we're actually going to travel out of my backyard and we're going to go into the front yard where we're going to photograph a different bird. And the bird that I'm talking about is a pigeon. You see, my neighbor right across the street has a flock of pigeons living on his roof right under his solar panels. And pigeons are not an easy bird to take pictures of. I don't know if you've ever tried before, but these are very fast birds. They average 77 miles per hour when they fly, and they can actually reach speeds up to 92 miles an hour. So they are very much built for speed and endurance. In fact, pigeons, I don't know if you knew this, but pigeons can actually fly up to 600 miles in one day. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. And so let's head on over from my backyard and go into my front yard and begin Project Birds in Flight. Okay, so here we are out in my front yard, and like I said, we're doing Project Birds in Flight, not only to show you what I do to continue honing my skills as a photographer, but also to help you improve in the area of capturing birds in flight. Remember, what I said earlier is that you can't go out into nature and just get lucky. You have to know how your camera needs to be set up, and you need to know how to use your camera when you're out in the wild, because you don't get second chances to capture wildlife or birds in action. You've got to be ready to go, and you got to be comfortable with your gear and know how it's going to work and know how you're supposed to set it up. And so what I want to do before we start taking photos of these pigeons is I want to share with you what gear I am using and what settings that I have with my gear. And so the camera that I'm using, as you can see, is my Canon 7D Mark II, and I also have a battery grip on this camera, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown on my 7D in just a moment. I use the battery grip because I like having twice as much life on my camera when I go out into the field. When I use this battery grip, I never worry about my camera running out of power in the day. It lasts me all day long, and so that's a benefit of this. It does add a little bit of weight though. However, for me, the trade-off is worth it. And the lens that I'm using on my 7D is the EF 100 to 400 millimeter lens. And this is an amazing lens. I love this lens. I did a lot of research on telephoto lenses before I made the investment on this, but I could not be happier with this lens. It just is built like a tank, and the quality of images that it produces is just fantastic. I am so pleased with this lens. And so now that you know what I'm using when I'm out in the wild, when I'm also trying to capture birds in flight, let's talk about settings on your camera. The first thing you want to do is switch your camera into shutter priority mode. Shutter priority mode on Canon cameras is on your main dial is labeled TV. If you're using another model other than a Canon, you'll just want to check your owner's manual to find out where shutter priority is. But on the Canon, if you go to the main dial, it's under TV. And the reason you want to use shutter priority when you're talking about capturing birds in flight is because shutter priority is the mode that enables you to freeze action. The higher your shutter speed number is, the more you will be able to freeze action. Now, typically when you're capturing birds in flight, you want to be anywhere from 1,000 up to 2,500. I typically, when I'm shooting pigeons, I'm usually going to be at a shutter speed of 1,600 all the way up to 2,500, depending upon the lighting conditions and depending upon how my images are coming out. If I'm not getting tack sharp images with a slower shutter speed, say like 1,600, then I will just move it up to 2,000 or 2,500 so that I can freeze action and have a really nice tack sharp image. Having control over your shutter speed is very important with capturing birds in flight. Unless you're trying to do something artistic by creating purposeful motion blur in your images, you want to have control over your shutter speed so that you can make sure you're freezing your birds in action so that you have a really nice image to look at. Now, some other important settings that you're going to want to know about is your ISO, or also referred to as ISO settings. And your ISO setting controls the quality of your image, but also it enables you to allow more light in. So when you are capturing birds in flight, I would typically encourage you to just have auto ISO on so that you can simply focus on the shutter speed and capturing the bird in flight in a tack sharp manner. When you have it on auto ISO, your camera will take care of the settings for you in that area. Now for myself, I will use auto ISO a lot, but I also will get some spot metering in areas that I know I want to capture the birds in. So if I'm shooting high up in the sky, I'll just take a few pictures of birds in the sky in the direction that I want to capture them in, and I will just set my ISO accordingly. Because again, the lower your ISO, the higher quality your image is going to be. There's not going to be as much grain in your images. The next important setting that you want to be aware of, and maybe for some this is a first introduction, is what is called back button focusing. Back button focusing is such a wonderful option for you to have as a photographer, especially if you're into photographing wildlife in action and birds in flight or even sporting events. Back button focusing is so important. You see, right now, the way a typical camera is set up is the way that you set your focus is on the shutter button. You press down halfway on the shutter button to actually lock in and get your subject in focus, and then you press down completely on your shutter button to take the picture. Well, that can be problematic when you're trying to capture images of birds in flight or animals that are moving fast in action, because anytime you need to reset your focus, you've got to press halfway down on your shutter button before taking the picture, because you need to get the image in focus. Your back button focusing is controlled by your AF on button on the back of your camera if you have a Canon. In fact, let me show you how to set this up. In order to set up back button focus, you first go to the Custom Controls menu. Then go to the Display Operations section, select Custom Controls and press the Set button. Then select the shutter button icon and press set. Then select metering start to remove autofocus from the shutter button. Now only the AF on button will trigger the autofocus, and you just hold the AF on button down to keep your subject in focus. And so again, now instead of pressing my shutter button halfway down to lock in on the target and get it in focus and then press it down full click in order to take the photo, now what I'm doing is I'm pressing the AF on button, and I can just hold my finger there and it will continuously lock on to whatever subject. If I move to something further in the foreground and I still have my AF on button locked down, it will then refocus on the subject in the foreground. I can just automatically start taking pictures. Now, using back button focus can be very strange at first. I liken it to when I switched over from my PC to a Mac years back. There was a learning curve, and I didn't like that learning curve. It was very uncomfortable. So there is a learning curve, but I assure you, once you become familiar with it, you will not regret it, and I guarantee you, you will never go back. The next important setting that you want to become familiar with is continuous high-speed shooting mode. What I love about the continuous high-speed shooting mode, especially on this Canon 7D, is that it allows me to capture 10 frames per second. Watch what I mean. That was cool, right? In order to set your camera up for continuous high-speed shooting mode, you will need to press the Drive AF button, then turn the quick dial until you get to the high-speed shooting icon, which is an H. Silent continuous shooting mode is also an option when you're close to the subject. You don't want to frighten birds or wildlife when you're taking pictures of them, and so silent continuous shooting is something you want to use whenever you're close to your subject so that you don't disturb them. The next important setting you want to be familiar with is your AF mode. That's your autofocus mode. I shoot Canon, and Canon offers two focus modes, AF and AI servo. AF is for stationary subjects, while AI servo is for fast movements such as birds or other wildlife. And I always have my camera set in AI servo. And so as I move into AF operation here, you can actually see there are three different options here, but really there's just two options. You have the one-shot option here, which is one-shot autofocus, and then the second one over here is AI servo, like I explained earlier, and the AI servo is for fast movement such as birds or other wildlife. Now the AI focus here is really a combination of both. When you're on AI focus, your camera will decide for you what the best option is, whether it's one-shot or AI servo. Whenever I'm shooting birds in flight or any wildlife, I always have my camera set to AI servo, and I set my AF to Expand AF Surround. And the reason I like using Expand AF Area Surround is because it allows me to use 8 surrounding focus points around one primary focus point. And a quick way to set up Expand AF Area Surround is by first pressing the menu button until you see the shooting information is displayed on the display screen. Then use the multi-function button labeled M/FN, or you can also use the AF Area Selection lever next to the LCD screen. Then you can select the Expand AF Area Surround. Again, this will allow you to use 8 supporting focus points, as you can see here, around one primary focus point. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the AF configuration tool. This is a little advanced, but I hope I can walk you through this and you can at least have an understanding of it and be able to set your camera to the setting that you want. I think you'll catch on pretty quickly. So let's look at that. What we want to do here is we want to select the configuration tool that best fits the behavior of the birds we are going to photograph. And that's what the AF configuration tool in the AF menu is meant to do. It's brilliant. Case 1 is the default case, and then there's case 2 and case 3, and I don't want to look at that. I want to move down to case 4. Case 4, as you see, are for birds that accelerate and decelerate. Case 5, however, is for birds that quickly change direction, like sparrows and other songbirds, as well as today's subject, pigeons. And so my camera is going to be set into case 5. Now the last thing I want to talk to you about, and really is one of the most important things, and that is lighting, or more specifically, light direction. It's vital for you to understand light direction and what an important part light plays in photographing birds in flight or wildlife in action. Whenever you're trying to photograph birds in flight, or wildlife for that matter, you want to have the sun behind you. When the sun is behind you, it lights up the entire image of the bird or the animal you're photographing. It's what enables you to take tack sharp images. It's what enables you to get those high quality images that you see. And we're going to take some photos today, and you'll see what I mean on how important it is to have light behind you, the sun behind you when you're taking pictures. And so whenever you go out, especially into nature, or even when you're taking images around your house, you always want to know where the sun is before you start taking pictures, because the sun is key in you getting high quality images that you'll be happy with. Now that we know how to set up our camera, as well as the other things that we need to be aware of when capturing birds in flight, let's go give it a shot and see how we do. Okay, as you can see, we've got some pigeons on the roof over there, and we're going to see if I can capture them now. And while I'm waiting for this guy right here to take off, I am hoping that he's going to fly to our left, which is to the west. And the reason I think he's going to fly to the west is because of wind direction. So right now we've got two things going for us that we want to take place. We've got wind direction and light direction. Before I talk about wind direction, let me remind you of the light direction. Now we've got the sunlight over here to the east, which is to our right of where the pigeon is at right now. And therefore we want the pigeon to head west. And when he heads west, the sun is going to put a spotlight on him. And so we're going to have a nice, crisp image of him if I can capture him in focus with the sunlight shining on the bird. It is going to enable the camera sensor to just capture all of the important details, to bring out the color and the details of the bird and his feathers. And so we always want the sunlight behind us in order to get a nice crisp image. Okay, now that we've talked about the importance of light direction, let's talk about wind direction real quick as we wait for this pigeon to take off. Wind direction is a really important and valuable tool for us as photographers, especially in the area of bird photography and capturing birds in flight. So this pigeon is on the west side of the house and he's facing west, which is a great thing. There's two key things that take place because of that. One, he's facing the west because he's most likely going to take off west. And why that's a good thing for us is because the sun is to the east of us, and so that is going to put a bright spotlight on the bird. And secondly, wind direction. Now, wind direction is such a great tool because he is facing west, and the reason he's facing west is because the breeze is coming from the west. So the wind is coming in right now from the west side. That's important to know because birds will most often fly off into the wind the majority of the time. So anytime you're out trying to capture birds in flight, you always want to be paying attention to which direction the wind is coming from, because when you have a bird that's perched and you want to capture him in flight, you can prepare yourself just by finding out the direction of the wind, because most often birds are going to fly into the direction of the wind. Okay, I'm just getting myself ready because I just feel like this guy's going to be leaving in a moment here. But you've got to be alert. There he goes. All right, yeah, that looks good. Okay, I'm happy with those images. Looks like I got some nice images of this bird because of everything we've been talking about. Let's take a look at this. One of the things I'll typically do after taking a few shots, and I'll do this throughout the day because lighting can change, settings can change, but what I'll do is I'll just look down on my viewfinder and I'll make sure my exposure is correct, and I will also make sure that the images that I'm taking photos of are in focus. And so that is something that I would encourage you to do as well. Here we can see why it's so important to have the fast shutter speed and why having the light behind us is vital. The fast shutter speed freezes the action, and with the light behind us, it really helps to light up the subject so that our camera sensor can capture as much information as possible and give us great detail in our images. And as you can see, the detail in this image is fantastic because we were able to freeze the action and because we had the light behind us. And so this is something that you're going to want to pay close attention to each time you go out and try to capture birds in flight. All right, we're off to a good start, so let's keep going and see what else I can get. Right now I have my camera set up on continuous high-speed shooting mode. However, even though my camera, this Canon 7D Mark II, does 10 frames per second, I don't want to just hold my shutter button down and fill up the memory card as quickly as I can by just holding down, you know, getting 20, 30 photos in a row, because what's going to happen is it's going to fill up my memory card's ability to process, and so it's going to buffer. And so as we're looking at the image of this pigeon that just took off, we see that once again, because the light is behind us, we are able to capture wonderful details from this bird. And because we have it in shutter priority with a shutter speed of 2500, we are able to capture wonderful details. Also, as I was speaking to you about continuous high-speed shooting mode, hopefully you heard what I was trying to explain, how I did not have my shutter button pressed down the entire time, just filling up the memory card, so that the memory card would have to buffer. What I was doing, instead of doing 10 frames per second continuously until it was full, is I was taking 3, 4, 5 shots at a time, and then I would pause and continue, pause, continue, pause, continue. Well guys, I feel like I got a lot of good material in our morning session, so I'm going to wrap this part up right now, and we'll come back out a little later when the sun gets over to the west side of us, and we'll see what we can come up with then. Okay, so I'm back out again today, and it's later on in the afternoon, and the sun is over on this side of us, and so now I don't want to shoot birds that are flying across towards the west. I want to go after birds that are coming at us from the east or flying on the east again. Okay, there it goes. Okay, let's see. Nice. Man, that looks good. Okay. All right, I've been getting some really good shots out here in the afternoon, and I just want to get a few more, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, I'm out here later in the day, and as you see, here come some pigeons coming at us. Where is it? Oh, there it is. You can really see, again, the details in this image, and I just love how the sunlight is hitting his neck, and you can see the purples in it, and it's just such a beautiful color. And this can only happen because we have our cameras on shutter priority with a high shutter speed. My shutter speed is at 2500 right now, so we're freezing action, and because the sunlight's behind us, it's putting a spotlight on this bird, and we're able to capture beautiful details in it. Hey, now's a good time to once again just say, if you found the information on this episode helpful, would you mind supporting this channel by clicking the like button as well as the subscribe button? Every time somebody hits like and subscribe, YouTube takes notice of it, and it's telling them that you like this content and you want to see more of it, and it gets my channel out to a broader audience. And so that would be really helpful and encouraging to keep me going and bringing you more episodes like this. Ooh. Here comes a raven getting attacked by a mockingbird. Oh, I'm getting it too. Oh, I can't wait to show you. Oh, that was awesome. I love taking pictures of animals. I can't wait to show you that. I was looking for the pigeons that were flying around, but then as I was looking out that way, all of a sudden I see this big dark figure coming, and I figured it was a raven, and it was a raven, and it was a mockingbird that was diving in on him. And what they call that is mobbing. It was just one mockingbird was mobbing the raven, and the reason that happens out in the wild or even in our neighborhoods is because the raven is probably either too close to the mockingbird's nest and is protecting eggs or young, or the mockingbird is just getting it out of getting that raven out of its territory. But I think I got some really good shots, and I hope I did, so that I can show you. Well, I'm able to look at some of the images I captured of the mockingbird chasing after the raven, and I got some good ones. Okay, so as you can see, we've got really great detail on the raven's beak and its wings. You can just see the sun shining upon it so that you can see the detail even in the midst of this being such a dark bird. And then you can see the mockingbird right behind it going after it. Again, that's another great shot. I love how, again, you can still clearly see the raven, and I just love how the wings of the mockingbird are spread out wide. Okay, these images are looking great. You can see that the raven's like looking over his shoulder there. Where is that little guy? Oh, and I really like this photo. I almost feel like the raven's looking at me saying, dude, can you help me, please? But I just love the expression on its beak. Its wings are just spread wide. Here we go. Looks as if the mockingbird is doing a Superman and just diving in after the raven here. And the raven's trying to look over his shoulder and at the same time get out of the way. Oh, this is a great shot. This is just wildlife in action. I love these dramatic encounters when we're fortunate to capture them. Oh, I love the expression here on the raven's face. He just looks determined to get out of Dodge. Another one, I love oh, this is great. Here's where the mockingbird has just dived down on him. Again, that's called mobbing, and you can see the raven just does the best he can to do a side maneuver to get out of the way. And this is a continuation of that photo where the mockingbird comes up to the other side, and the raven now is just thinking, please let me get out of here, bird. And here is a nice shot. I like this shot of the raven flying off, and because the sun is behind us, you can see that I'm able to get great detail of the raven, and I love how he's in the clouds, and yet you can see as a backdrop that really causes this black raven to stand out. But then I love the soft blue sky above the clouds. It just is a wonderful frame for this image. I want to thank you for joining me today on this episode and Project Birds in Flight. There are a few things you need to remember each time you go out. You want to remember to be in shutter priority mode. You also want to remember to keep your camera in continuous high-speed shooting mode. And you want to use the Expand AF Area Surround button. I would encourage you to switch your camera to back button focus. And don't forget, when you're out capturing birds in flight, when you're out capturing wildlife in action, you want to do your best to keep the sun behind you. When the sun's behind you, it's going to be like a big spotlight on the birds in flight as well as the animals. And that way you will capture a nice, clean image that you will be really happy with. And finally, it is important that you go out and practice these things. You want to become proficient with your equipment. Again, I want to just thank you for joining me. Have a great day and go capture the world.